Okay, heads up from the start. This video is going to include discussions of sexual abuse, including of children. Please use your own discretion when watching. I'm Adam, I have a PhD in atmospheric physics, and I'm here to help you make sense of the changing planet that we all share. And today we need to talk about the denial of climate science and Jeffrey Epstein. When I started this channel, I never imagined I'd be here discussing sexual predators of children. But that is one of the countless things that the Epstein Files reveal. Links between this sexual predator and climate denial. I use the word denial here deliberately to refer to people who actively deny and discount evidence in order to support the beliefs that they have. I don't use the word skepticism because that's about looking at the evidence, at all the evidence, in order to inform your belief. That's something we all ought to be doing. So let's start with Epstein's own views. In an email exchange in 2016, he shares a video which, from context, apparently showed a Nobel laureate with no expertise in the subject denying the harms of climate change. Epstein states, "I like the argument that more CO2 is good for plants." Now, firstly and foremostly, this argument, whether made by a Nobel laureate or a paedophile, is paper thin. Yes, CO2 is plant food, but plants are also adapted to the particular climate in which they grow. That means certain temperatures, periods of rain, dryness, and the harm caused by changing the climate outweighs any benefit from increased CO2. That's affecting both natural ecosystems and agriculture, both of which affect us. Secondly, and second mostly, I find this phrasing so revealing. I like the argument that. I hear this kind of phrase so often from people who deny climate science. Not, "I was wondering about," or "does this make sense?" That would indicate genuine scientific curiosity. But the point here is that Epstein already knows what he wants to believe, that climate change doesn't matter, and he likes this argument, since it supports what he wants to believe. Late in the thread, he sends a message filled with climate misinformation talking points. Is the South Pole getting colder and more ice? Nope and nope. Antarctica is heating substantially faster than the global average, and areas of the ice sheet are losing ice in vast quantities, potentially already passing tipping points where the ice loss can't be stopped by stopping heating. Then Epstein shares that he's with the Trump people, telling them, "I don't have any idea if this global warming is a threat that can be reduced currently, carbon-taking machines." Though I find Epstein's boomer grammar quite hard to decode, it seems he's acting as if climate change is a problem beyond human control, which it isn't. We have the understanding to know what to do, primarily stop burning fossil fuels, and the technology to do it, primarily by electrifying systems and building renewables, energy storage, and other low-carbon technology, like nuclear. Emphasizing carbon-taking machines emphasizes the idea we could keep emitting and suck up the problem later, which we definitely cannot. Oh, and on that Trump people part, we'll definitely come back to that in a moment. Finally, in this message, I would like to know what groups prefer warming. Canada, which completely misrepresents how climate change affects us. Yes, there are some regions whose climates may become milder as the world heats, but those regions are not adapted for that climate, and the changes are happening faster than people and ecosystems can adapt. On top of that, climate change disrupts our global systems, from our food systems to global security to the global economy. As we've seen from wars and environmental disasters over the past years, no country is isolated from any of those issues. The only groups that prefer warming are the groups that either don't understand it or have a vested interest in the things causing it, from fossil fuels to factory farming. In a separate conversation, Epstein seemed to accept but endorse climate change, saying, "Maybe climate change is a good way of dealing with overpopulation. Too many people, so many mass executions of the elderly and infirm make sense." Honestly, Jesus Christ. Now, there's a lot of misleading talk about overpopulation, but to discuss it using the phrase mass executions is just so unbelievably f***ed. The idea that overpopulation is at the root of humanity's problems is a popular one, though it's both scientifically and ethically fraught. It doesn't take too long to understand why, with a couple of examples. Statista lists South Sudan as having the highest population growth rate in the world, but Our World in Data calculates that the average South Sudanese person has a carbon footprint 100 times lower than the average US American, hardly a major driving force of the world's problems. And I hope it goes without saying, but Epstein was not an average US American. Hoarding wealth, vast properties, private jets, everything Epstein did and everyone he was associated with would have had staggering emissions and drained our planet's resources at a far higher rate than any typical person from any country you can name. Oxfam calculates that together, the world's richest 1% emit as much as the poorest 2/3 of the world's population combined. Put simply, the problem isn't overpopulation, it's overconsumption. And the idea of climate change driving mass executions of the elderly and infirm, who is it who deserves to be executed? Who is it who decides who deserves to die? It seems like Epstein feels he gets to decide, and we already know plenty about how Jeffrey Epstein valued human lives. In a later exchange, after Trump took office for the first time, Epstein shared news of NASA spending, saying, "I told you not to worry, he will decimate climate change and support verifiable projects." Trump's first presidency was devastating for climate action, denying basic climate science and gutting projects. This term, barely a year in, has been profoundly worse. Trump has attacked renewable projects, gutted spending on climate and weather research, and recently the administration rejected the finding that greenhouse gases are harmful to human health, which means the EPA can no longer do anything about them. That's right, the Environmental Protection Agency can no longer protect our environment and us from the harms of greenhouse gases. Side note, but I found it darkly funny that the New York Times initially reported on this as Trump repealing the scientific finding. Mate, you cannot repeal a scientific finding. That is not how science works. If you're watching this video, you probably do care how climate science does work, so you probably ought to subscribe. While you're clicking on things, a like and a comment help the video reach more people, and if you really valued the channel, then becoming a patron up here helps keep it alive, since I don't sell you stuff you don't need with product placements or with ads. Okay, but back to Trump. The files show Epstein's links to climate denial go beyond his own views and words. There's who he associated with and who wanted to associate with him. People like Trump, of course. There's significant evidence of Trump's involvement and friendship with Epstein and with sexual assault. Trump, of course, denies this, though, pro tip, withholding huge amounts of evidence isn't normally the best way of convincing people you've done nothing wrong.
I never had the privilege of going to his island.
And Trump has long denied pretty much everything we understand about climate change. When all the evidence shows that humans are responsible, he claims,
"It's the greatest con job ever."
When all the evidence shows the planet's heated at unprecedented rates, Trump says,
"It'll start getting cooler. You just watch."
And when we develop incredible tools that are capable of turning the tide on the problem, he argues,
"Those big windmills are so pathetic."
According to Trump's rhetoric, climate change is just a left-wing scam. In The New Republic, Kate Aronoff drew parallels between this language and his justification for failing to release more information about Epstein. Trump argues that the conversation about Epstein is a tactic of the radical left Democrats, calling it bullshit and saying their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Whether discussing climate or accusations of sexual abuse, Trump's strategy remains deny, deflect, discredit. But while Trump is the most obvious climate denier, named the most staggering number of times in the files, another name surprised people from the climate world: Bjorn Lomborg. Lomborg is a well-known lukewarmist, arguing that the threat of climate change has been overblown. While research increasingly shows that the human and financial costs of climate impacts will far outweigh the cost of inaction, Lomborg claims that action to halt climate change is unnecessary and uneconomical. And, well, you can see where this is going. He's named in the Epstein Files. He'd arranged to meet Epstein, apparently in search of funding. Drilled breaks down all the evidence we have about the encounter, reporting that Epstein sought to cut the meeting short in preference for other opportunities. But it's notable that the encounter took place in September 2012, 4 years after Epstein pled guilty to charges of soliciting prostitution and of soliciting prostitution from someone under the age of 18. The Copenhagen Consensus Center, founded and led by Lomborg, told Drill that Lomborg was not aware of Epstein's prior conviction at the time. Of course, just meeting with Epstein in no way means that an individual was implicated in the abuse of women and children. And it's important to mention that Epstein also associated with people who promoted climate science, like Lawrence Krauss, who corrected much of Epstein's climate misinformation that I mentioned earlier. Krauss also spoke up in defense of his friend Epstein when he faced allegations, and would himself leave his post at Arizona State University in 2019 amid allegations of sexual misconduct. Then there's Bill Gates, who has been at the center of a wide range of accusations and who has long been a proponent of climate action, though more on that in a moment. So the point of this video isn't that there's some inherent link between denial of climate change and its harms and sexual abuses. But I do think that running through all of this, there's a pattern of power. We see that time and time again, people with power will do what they can to abuse that power, which ultimately means abusing people. And protecting that power means protecting the sources of that power and profit, regardless of how it harms the rest of us. And this is all overwhelming, right? There's just so much awful going on right now, whether that's genocide, sexual violence, or mass violence and abuses towards immigrants and refugees. It can be hard to keep climate change in mind at times like this, even for me. ClimateAdam. Emily Atkin recently penned a piece in Heated titled "I Don't Know How to Do This," where she reflects on the emotions she's experiencing witnessing the rise of fascism and authoritarian violence in the United States. It's like I start believing that climate change is something separate from state violence, and it's not. After all, both share common perpetrators, victims, and a pattern of valuing profits above human lives. And so, when it comes to solutions, while the specifics may be different, the fundamentals can't be separated. They involve rethinking power and challenging those who abuse it and abuse us in order to cling to it. I don't have any fundamental advice on how to do that. I mean, I'm just a physicist, and physics is so much easier than all of this. But I do hope that the clearer we can see the links between the abuses done to us, done to our neighbors, done to our planet, our home, and done to our children, well then the clearer the path forward becomes. And I hope that we can carve out that path together. Now, I mentioned Bill Gates as a proponent of climate action, and, well, that description is definitely up for debate. Find out more over here. Okay, until next time. Bye. F***ing hell, that was bleak.